What do you mean, what's happened to me?
I don't know. Except that you've lost your guts and all of a sudden I'm ashamed of you.
Tom and Betsy Rath should have been happy. They had managed to buy a new house. They had healthy children and a rising income. But for reasons they couldn't understand, they were deeply dissatisfied with their lives.
School.
Without talking about it much, Tom and Betsy Rath began to think of their house as a trap, and they no more enjoyed refurbishing it than a prisoner would delight in shining up the bars of his cell.
The mystery of a growing dissatisfaction was at the heart of the most famous 50s novel, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. It became a bestseller and a popular movie because it captured in very human terms a certain desperation that lingered behind the new affluence. The more money Americans made, the more they seemed to spend. No paycheck and no house ever seemed to be big enough.
The book was written as a protest against the conformity in which I felt I was being shoved. And I didn't reason that all out at the time. I thought it was just autobiographical, especially the first part of it.
When Sloan Wilson returned from the war, he and his wife, like Tom and Betsy Rath in the novel, were deeply insecure about what they had. Working at a steady but dull job, Sloan Wilson felt a terrible social pressure to do whatever it took to earn more money, buy a bigger house, and drink a better brand of gin.
I had friends who got involved with large boats, yacht clubs, country clubs, mansions, all this stuff, and went broke on $200,000 a year, and then found themselves owing back tax money. So this was really quite a common disaster.
During the 50s, a new consumer's aid was invented, the credit card. For the first time in history, average Americans could buy now and pay later. By the end of the decade, Sears had issued credit accounts to 1 out of every 5 American families. A nation of savers had become a nation of debtors, hustling to meet their monthly payments.
Well, I hear there's a spot opening up in public relations where I work, in United Broadcasting.
What would it pay?
Oh, I don't know. 8,000, 10,000, I guess, something like that.
Well, I could certainly do with 8,000 or 10,000. But I don't know anything about public relations.
Who does? You got a clean shirt, you bathe every day, and that's all there's to it.
The higher a man gets in business, the harder the moves get.
Climbing the ladder to success was a grim business. In the 50s, it was called the rat race, a competition to see who could be the best company man.
The Man in the Great Flannel Suit touched a nerve. It's a great title. Am I a colorless man? Am I a functionaire at a high level? Have I lost control of my life? Do I belong to the corporation I work for rather than to myself? Have I made the right choice, or have I settled for something?
I mean, most of us worked for big corporations in those days. And the big corporation was in some ways more authoritative than the armed services were.
Glad to have you aboard, Tom.
Thank you, Gordon.
I was working for Time and Life shortly after I got out of the service, and a young man from the personnel department was dispatched to tell me that I was not dressed properly. He said, you really ought to go to Brooks Brothers and get a gray flannel suit.
We'd like to see something else. Perhaps dark gray.
But I suddenly realized it was a uniform of the day, that I was back in the service, that I had to dress like this. And I began very much to resent it. I've always, I suppose, like many writers, wondering, you know, what kind of man am I? Who am I? And I looked in the mirror one day and I said, I know what I am. I'm just a man in a gray flannel suit. One more of them.
In the novel, Tom Rath could never escape the memories of war.
Come
on, Tom, we gotta get out of here. All right, get out of the way.
It's strange. I was only in the service 4 years, and I'm 75 years old. It's a tiny part of my life, but maybe half of everything I've written is about the war. The feeling that you were a white knight, it was a wonderful feeling, that we are fighting the forces of evil and winning. And to get yourself together and run a good part, your own tiny part of the whole military machine, but to run it right, in my case, a small ship. We were jumped by a Japanese plane and we shot it down. It does confer a certain dignity upon a young man. You're left with all these powerful, churning emotions, and somehow the whole scene has gone. You know, it's like somebody put off the movie projector.
Suddenly, Wilson, the war hero, like so many others, had become just another man on a train. Every day, suburban office workers streamed into the city. Every night, they staggered home, relieving the relentless pressure in the bar cars.
I drank a lot in those days, and almost everybody I knew did. You had to wait in Grand Central to get a train. Well, you waited at a bar and had a drink. Then you get on the train. That's boring, so you go in the bar car and have a drink. Then you get home, and there's a certain tension in getting home and seeing what's happening there, so you have a martini there. So you've had a lot of drinks before you even start drinking.
Good evening, children.
Tom Rath and Sloan Wilson were haunted by the emptiness of their lives. They were living a lie, because they could not reveal to their wives the passion and the romance of their wartime memories.
You remember the terrible hunger, not just for sex, but for love, or for something good in your life.
I think everybody feels that he or she has some shadow over them, you know, that we can't quite get rid of. And I think what the resonance of this book is something that's applicable to a lot of his fellow Americans at that time.
Something did happen to me in the war. Something I've never told you about. I have another child, Betsy. A son. In Rome. I've never heard from his mother since we left there. But now she's written to me about it. I don't know how to make you realize the way things were then. Nobody knows who wasn't in the war. I killed 17 men I was actually looking at. Looking right straight at them. Not enemies at a distance that I couldn't see, but persons. Persons like you see in the train, in the elevator. Was having a child worse than things like that?
I don't know. Only the child has happened to me.
In the novel, Tom and Betsy Rath solved their problems by confronting them honestly. Sloan Wilson faced the truth of how trivial his life had become when a rival junior executive beat him to the job of holding the hat of Wilson's boss.
I realized I'd been one-upped and that he had seen that the hats should be taken. And I said to him meekly, "Can I hold my man's hat?" And then I started to laugh, and nobody had any idea why I was laughing. He didn't think it was funny. He said, "Yes, you may hold your man's hat." And I thought, I got to get out of here. You know, this is not a life for me. And the next day I did quit.
Sloan Wilson decided to become a full-time writer. When his first marriage ended in divorce, he sold his house and bought a sailboat where he now lives. Now remarried, he has produced a number of well-regarded novels, but none as successful as The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit.
I would think that if you asked Sloan Wilson, he would tell you that for the rest of his life, people came up and told him, "Your book spoke to me. You are the one that defined our generation."